right, so the first card that we're going to create is this one here, and the very first step is we're going to do the alcohol lift ink image, and then we're going to stamp them onto these other pieces for the other two cards. So this one here is glossy cardstock. It's got a glossy finish to it, and this one here is just plain cardstock. So the first one I'm going to stamp off onto is the glossy cardstock, and then I'm going to stamp off onto the plain. So make sure you've got a good amount of the alcohol lift ink on there. Choose where you want to stamp on your background here. Any of these really, really thick areas are not going to lift off very well, so I try to avoid those areas. Hold the stamp down with one hand and press firmly. Make sure it has really good contact with your background there, and then stamp this one down. There we go. Set that aside to dry. I'm going to leave that there, and we'll use that in just a moment. For this, to lift this off completely, we're going to need a piece of completely clean paper towel. Press it down on the image, flip it over, press it down on the image, and I do this 4 times. If you feel it needs more, then you can do it more, but I find what we're doing here is lifting up the wet ink from that alcohol lift ink, and you can't smear it, otherwise you're going to smear your image, and usually 4 times is good. This time we got that much, so now we're going to take a clear area and we're just going to buff it, and that removes and cleans up that image. There we go. Set that aside for a second. This one here, there's still ink on that surface, so I'm just going to mist it with some isopropyl 2 times from each side. And it's just rehydrating that ink. Oops. And typically you don't want to lose control of your acrylic block and have it drop on you, but if it does drop, you got to work with where it drops. There we go. So you see how each time there's just a little bit less ink, and the glossy cardstock, the inks just seem a little bit brighter on it. Regular cardstock, it just seems a little bit on the duller side, but that's okay. So I'm going to put these aside. We're going to use them for the next 2 cards. The stamp can be put to the side as well, and we can start assembling this card. I've got the card base already done. And I also have my Happy Holidays and my greenery die cut completely done. I found that they're die cut exactly the same way as the die cut flowers, so I just didn't think you needed to see that again. What I tried on this background, and it didn't really work, I tried that very first technique that I did with the pine cones, and I colored some green onto the stamp and then misted it and stamped it. So you'll see a tiny little bit of green here, but the rest of them you don't actually see. So I skipped that step, but just at the off chance that you were able to see that green there, that's why it's there. I had high hopes that it would make the greenery on there pop out a little bit more, have a bit of a different color. And then when that didn't work, I chose the gold vellum greenery die cuts instead. All right, now I only have one of these die cut, and the reason is I broke it in half. One of them is going to be glued right there. Oops, need the cap off the glue. And this is just going to help pop that poinsettia flower off the background a little bit more as well. Make it look a little bit different from the backing. Now you'll see my vellum here pops up, and that's because it does not like, let's do this one next. It does not like glue. Vellum doesn't like any liquid. So as soon as you put a liquid glue on there, it does tend to pop up. but it relaxes a little bit once it's dry. You can, if you want, put an acrylic block over top of it to hold it down in place while everything is drying. And I'm actually going to do that while I'm putting glue on the next piece, just to hold it down. And I'm using my Distress Collage medium. Again, it dries completely clear and it dries matte, so you don't see where the glue is. But with this glossy cardstock here that I've got the word cut out of, you want to be especially careful to not accidentally get it on the front of the die cut, because if you do, you're going to be able to see a bit of a different texture. And it's one of those things that probably wouldn't see it unless someone pointed it out, but just be careful not to get that glue onto the front. And really any glue is going to change the texture of that glossy cardstock anyways. Now I'm going to put down my flower. And you see how just a little, being a little bit lighter, it pops out from the rest of the card a little bit better. And then last but not least, I've got some platinum stickles here that's going to tie in with the gold from the greenery, as well as the gold from the sentiment. And I just do kind of little dots. I like it to have a little bit of the same texture that poinsettias have in the middle. And there we go. My glue is still wet, but I'm going to let that set that aside to dry. I am going to put the acrylic block on the Happy Holidays just to hold that down while it dries. But then once it's completely dry, that's what we've got right there.